I am human. One of billions, but unique. I am not alone. I am connected to my friends, to my family, to the world. We are all humans together. And I will keep trying to be the best version of me. I am full of hope. I am human. Thank you.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church and its work. Each week, we would like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time. This week, the group is Gardens. I know personally, I live in Rochester, and so I'm not in this area a whole lot. But my parents do live in Clifton Springs, and I find myself driving the long way, the scenic way, by the church so that I can see the gorgeous gardens here. And every time I pull in, it's just beautiful. And I appreciate everyone that works on that team. And if you're interested in finding out more, you can contact Lynn, and I've erased the last name. Cronus. My finger went. 1/4 of our plate collection for the harvest season goes to the Friends of Ganondagan, who support this national historic landmark and the only New York State historic site dedicated to a Native American theme. The culture, art, agriculture, and government of the Seneca people influenced our modern understanding of equality, democratic government, women's rights, ecology, and natural foods. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check into the basket or by one of the options on your screen. Please make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering. And now we'll share joys and sorrows. Today we're sending love and strength to several friends and families struggling with serious health issues. They are Rick, Brendan, and Carolyn. And Carrie wants to share her sorrow for Israel and all Jewish people, and sorrow for everyone affected by the earthquake in Afghanistan. I will now drop a stone for these and all the joys and sorrows left in the silence of our hearts. Whatever is in your heart today, we are with you. At this time, if there are any children who would like child care, please go downstairs with Laura and Kaya.
This morning, we're going to take a different approach than we usually do for centering and meditation. And we're going to learn the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. This is useful for when you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, or everything is just a little too much for you at the moment. You can use it anywhere, anytime you need to. The beauty of this method is you don't have to be calm at all when you start. You just need to know that you need to help yourself. You can even use it to help guide someone else if you need to. So we're going to focus on our senses as a way to bring us to the present and calm our inner chaos. I'll describe the process, and then there'll be the usual time for us to all be quiet so that we can practice. So it goes like this. What are 5 things that you can see? Look for small details, such as a pattern on the ceiling, or the way the light reflects off a surface, or an object you never noticed. Then think about 4 things you can feel or touch. Notice the sensation of clothing on your body, or the sun on your skin, or the feeling of the chair that you're sitting in. Maybe pick up an object and examine its weight, texture, and other physical qualities. Then move on to 3 things that you can hear. Pay special attention to sounds that your mind usually tunes out. Things like clocks ticking, or distant traffic, or trees blowing in the wind, kids downstairs. What are 2 things that you can smell? Try to notice smells in the air around you, like air freshener or freshly mowed grass. You may also look around for something that has a scent, like a flower or a candle. And lastly, 1 thing that you can taste. You can carry gum or candy or snacks for this, or you can just think about a taste that you really enjoy. Focus your attention closely on the flavors. So let's all just try it. So, let's talk about mental health. When my daughter was not quite 13, toward the end of her first year of middle school, she was hospitalized for what at the time was unexplained, erratic, and unsafe behavior. This had been escalating over the prior year or so. She was increasingly unable to get up in the mornings or to get to school. It seemed as if a simple obstacle, like she couldn't find her hairbrush or didn't understand a math problem, would cause an epic meltdown that would take hours to recover from. Andrea and I would sit on the couch watching TV and wonder out loud if tonight would be the night that someone would call 911 because of all the screaming and the chaos. It never was. She struggled in school too. Eventually, she had an incident in the classroom. My memory is pretty vague on specifics, but she left in the middle of the day, out the side door. I left work and Andrea posted on Facebook asking if anyone had seen her. I called 911 myself and filed a missing persons report. The officer asked if she had any mental health issues. I said no and described the previous 3 months. He checked the yes box. She was nowhere for 8 hours. Eventually, the mom of 2 boys at her school noticed her on the street. It was starting to get dark. The mother called me. I called my ex-husband, Melissa's dad. Somewhere in there, in the middle of the chaos, I had called my therapist, who was pretty familiar with what had been going on lately. She calmly told me that this was now too big for me to handle on my own. And she suggested that when Melissa was found, I take her to the emergency room for help. When her dad and I got to the apartment, Melissa acted as if this was all just a regular day and she was visiting friends, and she refused to leave. I took a deep breath, called 911 again, and requested an ambulance. They, of course, also sent police officers, and the officers questioned Melissa about what had been going on at school and at home that had led to her running away. I insisted on the ambulance. At the hospital, they took the usual current state of health and family histories. It was then, for the first time, that her dad said that his mom had been diagnosed as manic depressive and had been hospitalized several times during his childhood. Melissa was admitted to a very pastoral behavioral health unit upstate, and she stayed for about a week. She was diagnosed with unspecified mood disorder, given some medication, and returned back to her previous life. The medication helped for a bit, and then it didn't. So they increased the dosage, and it helped for a bit, then it didn't. And this went on for several months until she was glassy-eyed, and her thinking slowed, and she was still erratic and unsafe. I went with her to a scheduled medication appointment and told them I didn't think this was working. The doctor said that her best option was probably a different medication and that a hospital stay was the safest way to do that. They suggested that I take her to Bellevue Emergency, a few blocks away. They would call ahead and explain the situation. I was terrified. Bellevue Hospital is where they take really crazy people. Turns out, that's because Bellevue has a long, well-established history of treating mental illness, and they're really good at it. I called her dad again, and he met us in the ER. While we were waiting in a room, just the three of us, Melissa was positively humming with excitement, almost vibrating. She was telling us all about school and her friends and pulling things out of her backpack to show us, and singing and hopping from chair to chair and jumping from topic to topic to topic. They called her in to talk to her privately. Her dad looked at me and said, "What was that?" I shrugged and said, "I guess that's what mania looks like." She was admitted to the children's psychiatric unit and stayed for about a week. It was the second week of 7th grade. Over the next 12 months, she was hospitalized another half dozen times. Her diagnosis changed to bipolar disorder with psychotic features, and eventually anxiety was added. I learned about mental illness and joined support groups and developed a community so that I could help her and myself. I fought with educators and insurance companies and child protective service and ambulance drivers to get her the care she needed. There were several more 911 calls. Turns out she runs when things are too much for her. She missed a lot of school and a lot of life. There were many issues to deal with, and often they conflicted. I made decisions based entirely on two main goals: keep her safe and get her healthy. She has told me that if I hadn't fought so hard, she likely would not have made it to her 18th birthday. But she did make it to her 18th birthday, and that changed everything. Well, not her mental illness or my tenuous ability to keep her safe, but the mental health care system for adults is very different than it is for children. The threshold for danger to herself or others is much higher. She can refuse treatment, and I'm not informed about her care without her consent. Not long after she turned 18, we moved out of the city to where we live now. Finding adequate healthcare providers is much more difficult and much less prioritized here. We learned together how to navigate the system. We managed pretty well. After Andrea moved away to grad school, Melissa moved into a house that she and I bought together. I provided the down payment, and she would pay the mortgage. And then COVID. We all know the impact that COVID had on the healthcare system, and we all know the struggles that many people had with mental health as a result of life, as we know it, changing overnight. The inadequacies of the mental health care system in this country were exposed, and real people fell through the cracks. Melissa was one of them. She needed more support than she could access, and the less well-treated she was, the more paranoid she became. Paranoia, in her case, meant that she didn't see that she needed help, and so she refused treatment. Eventually, she decided to move back to New York City, and 2 days later, she left with 2 suitcases. I hugged her tight, told her I loved her and to be safe, and said goodbye. Her plans fell apart quickly. She lived in a homeless shelter, went off all of her meds, which, to be fair, weren't working anyway. She lived through trauma that I cannot begin to imagine. She left the shelter and stayed with friends or lived on the streets. She got herself SNAP and Medicaid and SSDI. She called occasionally, and the conversations almost always ended in arguments. She mainly kept in touch with her dad, who would keep me mostly informed about how she was doing. And then one day, a year or so later, she was on my front porch with one big suitcase ringing my doorbell. And we talked about what it would be like and what I would and would not tolerate in my house. And she promised that she would help with chores and learn to drive and get her GED. I would like to say that it was that easy, but it wasn't. She was unmedicated and erratic and volatile and screaming. So much screaming. I slept with my car keys and my cell phone under my pillow. I went into the office most days, even though I didn't have to for work. My neighbor met me in the backyard over the fence to ask if I was okay. He told me to call if I needed anything, anytime. After a few weeks, there was an incident. My memory's vague about the specifics. I had gotten the car to get milk. She stood in the way, so I couldn't back out. She climbed on the roof of the car. I called 911 and requested an ambulance. They, of course, sent police officers. The officers questioned her about what had been going on that caused her to do that. I told them about her mental health issues and that she was not taking any meds. They said they would drive her to the hospital. She refused and said she wouldn't get into a car with strangers. The ambulance never came. The officers got another call about something else and left. After they left, Melissa and I talked about how this was not working and was not going to end well. It was bigger than the help I could give her. She argued and then agreed, so I took her to the hospital. And she bravely stood at that desk and asked them for help. She was admitted and stayed for about 10 days. And I would like to say that it was that easy, but if you've been following along, you know it wasn't. There was another hospitalization and medication change several months later, this time with less drama. And now her medications are working the way they should, and her condition has stabilized. She has case management to help her navigate the system, and they gave her a ride to the DMV so that she could get her permit. And she's learning how to drive, and this week signed up for the 5-hour driving course. And she found a GED program that she could walk to, and she went to all the classes. She told them that she needed extra time and frequent breaks while testing. And she passed all 4 tests. And now she has a high school diploma. And she cooks dinner more often than I do and is the primary dishwasher emptier in our house. I really appreciate that part. She comes to church regularly, and she takes trips to visit her dad and her aunt and her grandma. And she's making friends and building a life. So I know that was a long story. Melissa's story, told through my perspective. Why did I decide it was important to talk about this? Because even though the details are specific to this story, to my family, I know my family is not the only one with a story like this. millions of people in the U.S. are affected by mental illness this year. And when I say mental illness, I specifically mean any and all of the following: ADHD, anxiety, bipolar disorder, depression, eating disorders, PTSD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and schizophrenia. It's not an all-inclusive list, but these are all-inclusive illnesses affecting people of all races, nationalities, income levels, education, age, and background. 1 in 5 adults experiences a mental health disorder. 1 in 20 experience a serious mental illness, meaning that the illness causes serious functional impairment that substantially interferes with one or more major life activities, like going to work, or going to school, or building relationships. Having a mental health condition can make it challenging to live everyday life and maintain stability. Beyond the individual with the illnesses, the challenges ripple through our families, our communities, and our world. More than half of people with mental illness don't receive treatment, and many others receive inadequate or incomplete treatment. Mental illness is on some level hereditary, but a parent with an illness does not always have a child with an illness. There are other factors involved. Scientists believe this could be environmental or temperamental or even viral, but they don't really know, because mental health research is miles behind other health research. There's not enough funding, and it has not been a priority. Society tends to think that people who are struggling are just not trying hard enough, as if you can will yourself to make your brain uptake serotonin the way it was designed to. No one would ever suggest that someone with diabetes should try harder to produce insulin, because modern medicine tends to separate concerns of the mind from concerns of the body. And this is a tradition that goes all the way back to Hippocrates. The do no harm guy. He attributed thinking to the brain and actions to the body. But both operate on electricity and chemicals, so maybe they aren't that different after all. Less than 2 weeks ago, a group of 7 U.S. Surgeon Generals gathered in Dartmouth to talk about mental health and the inadequacies of the U.S. mental health care system. They unanimously agreed that we are facing a crisis. And when the current Surgeon General asked the audience how many people knew anyone who struggled with mental health, every single person raised their hand. And I'm reasonably certain that if I asked that same question here and now, I would get the same result. But we don't share our concern for our friends and loved ones during joys and sorrows. And we're unlikely to talk about it during coffee hour or potluck. If someone breaks their arm or gets an unexpected physical health result, the community rallies around them. Their friends and neighbors bring casseroles and volunteer to take them to appointments and offer to sit and listen to their concerns and their fears. But mental illnesses are not casserole illnesses. Often friends and neighbors don't know what to say, so they say nothing and stay away. This is largely because of stigma. And by stigma, what I really mean is fear. The fear that comes from a lack of understanding and leads to discrimination. The funny thing about that is, even though I understand mental illness very well, and as you have now learned, I've been adapting and accepting it as part of my life for a long time now. I'm still afraid that you won't understand, or that you will judge me, or my loved ones, or think it's too personal, or scary, or inappropriate to talk about. But based on the statistics, that doesn't make any logical sense. There are fewer people in the world with blue eyes than there are with mental health conditions. And no one thinks blue eyes are scary or uncommon. And 1 in 5 is a high percentage. If you think about it as your house, plus the 2 on either side, and the 1 across the street, and the 1 in the backyard, that's 5 houses. And let's assume in this example that 4 adults live in each house, because that makes the math easier. That's 20 adults total. That means that within the houses of you and your closest neighbors, there are 4 people actively living with a mental health condition, treated or not. That's a lot of people in a really small area. And it's not just them who's affected by the illness. The effects ripple over everyone else in those households. And I'm pretty sure that if we're afraid to talk about mental health here, within these very open-minded, safe walls of UUCC, because we fear judgment and discrimination, we are almost definitely not talking about it with our neighbors. And by the way, when I did this thought exercise with my neighbors, I counted 16 people total, including children, in those 5 houses. 6 of them have mental health issues that I know about. And 5 of those 6 I would consider serious, as in interfering with life activities. I came across a scientific study on the stigma of mental illness over time. The majority of respondents indicated that they would not want to live next door to someone with schizophrenia. They were afraid that that would mean that their neighbor would be prone to violence. The truth is, people with mental illness are far more likely to be a victim of violence than they are to be the perpetrator. And if we eliminated people with mental illness altogether, that would mean no Robin Williams, or Kate Spade, or Picasso, or Van Gogh, or Axl Rose, or Brian Wilson. You get the idea. Because mental illness and creativity are closely linked for reasons that we do not fully understand. So what can we do individually and as a community to address and reduce the stigma of mental health? We can educate ourselves and others. We can choose our language carefully and be respectful and thoughtful when speaking about real people with real illness. We can show compassion and be empathetic towards our friends, neighbors, and strangers. We can normalize treatment and discuss mental illness the same way we would any physical illness. And we can talk openly about our experiences with mental illness by sharing our stories, because we are not alone. It is my hope that by sharing my story today, I will make it easier for others to share. I chose to speak openly about Melissa's challenges and successes with her permission, because I want you to feel comfortable speaking about your challenges and successes. We are strong together in community because we share the experience of being human. Mental health concerns and mental illness are also part of being human. Please, don't be afraid. I promise I will listen.
Down, in trouble, need some love and care. Nothing is going right. Close your eyes and think of me, and soon I will be there. Bright enough, even your darkest night. Just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running, see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you gotta do is call, and I'll be there, yes I will. You've got a friend. Sky above you grows dark and full of clouds, and that old north wind begins to blow. Just keep your head together and call my name out loud, and soon you'll hear me knocking at your door. Just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you gotta do is call, and I'll be there, yes I will. You got a friend. Now ain't it good to know you got a friend when people can be so cold? They'll hurt you and desert you and take your soul if you let them. Don't you let them. You just call out. I'll come running to see you again. Something will fall. Well, all you gotta do is call, and I'll be there, yes I will. You got a friend. You got a friend. You got a friend.
So today's a potluck Sunday. It's not an accident. I really enjoy spending time on potluck Sundays, interacting with the community. And I'm hoping that today, maybe we can move just a little bit closer to turning mental health and mental illness into casserole illnesses. And there'll be some handouts in case you're not really sure what to say, just to help you feel a little bit more comfortable, maybe a little bit more brave. But today, let's talk about mental health.
Our closing hymn this morning is number 311. Let it be a dance.
Please join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.